Vimsarasatim vyasam tato jayodhire. Nashta prayashu bhadreshu nityam bhagata sevya bhagatirta mashuki bhaktir bhavati neshtaki. Nikamalka padurgaritam param shukamukaram
Sevya
vitajna
bhagatirta
visamanam
mashuki
bhagavata
bhaktir bhavati.
bhagatam rasamare mahora horisikubhavakaham. Krishna swadamapagate dhammagirahe karo nashta dvishamasha parana kodunodidam. Twamapi adabhishuta vishutami bhus. Samapi hariyana birambi bhuksiram prakyaya duhur mohadiram. Sanklesha nirvana musanti nanyataham. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantara Kansamostate Jayatam Sharito Pangon Mahamumanir Matirgati Matsavasha Param Bojo Radhan Madan Mohanam Sriman Rahasarasaram Vibhamsivar Karsan Veneration of Gopanata Sri Saraham Divyat Vrindaranya Kampadrumada Srimad Radhagada Shimashanishto Sri Sri Radha Shila Govinda Prastadabhi Sevamano Shmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chaji Garitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Rajaja Mangalam Pari Kaksho Mangalaya Tanohari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Cha Vidmahi Vishnu Padni Cha Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastabhyam Namastabhyam Sureswari Hare Priya Namastabhyam Namastabhyam Nyayate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishapana Sute Devi Pranamani Hare Priya Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamanam Stay Sarasati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunibari Paskada Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Vindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Thanks for joining us Motivational Monday. I noticed Vallabha Chandra is here as always, faithful. And in case you're wondering about Josh, he did do a book table last night. He was at the station at the door with books and talking to people. I'm not sure about last week. He may have been there and I might not have noticed, but he definitely did a book table this week as well. So Haribo books, Haribo. We've been talking in the last few sessions about doors with posted signs on them which say no entrance or entrance prohibited. In big apartment buildings, there'll be a maintenance room where there is all your HVAC, your heating, your plumbing, and maybe even a generator in case power goes out. Big apartment buildings, big office buildings have generators for backup power. And on the door of the generator room, there might be a very yellow and black sign with jagged lightning and say no entry, danger, like that, telling the layman, the casual passersby, if you will, in no uncertain terms, you are not to open this door and go in. And above and all that, the door is probably locked. So it's not that nobody can go in, it's that layman can't go in. You're dealing with a generator, you're dealing with tens of thousands of volts of electricity. Someone who doesn't know what they're doing could kill themselves very easily. I remember one of the engineers we had for our radio station down here many years ago. He also worked on KSL, and KSL at that time had a big transmitter. And some or other he was above the transmitter, and he dropped a wrench, and the wrench was touched the metal transmitter through which thousands of volts were coming, and he grabbed the wrench and he got it. And he always had some neurological disorders after that. So it's very dangerous to go into the room to be with equipment that you're not qualified. Now, an expert electrician, someone who knows generators, he could not only safely maintain and correct, clean, replace parts in the generator, but he also can make that same generator, that same electricity, he can use it for heating the apartments in the winter, and he can use that same electricity for cooling the apartments in the summer. That's how expert he is. But if someone doesn't have that level of training expertise, under no circumstances should they go through that door into that room. Somebody had said, Shruti Smiti Pranadi Panchadi Kantikapade Utpateyaiva Kalpate. Someone who presents themselves, who enters through the door, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, all the vast literatures of bhakti, and who is not trained, is not qualified in three important ways, is going to do harm to themselves, and they're also going to do harm to others. Andab yatanda yarupadema. A blind person should not shout out, I can see, everybody follow me. Because the other blind people, they cannot discern that the so-called leader himself or herself is blind. And taking them at their word, they'll all fall into a ditch. There are many people who pretend to be spiritualists, who pretend to be gurus, who pretend to be illuminated souls, and who are not, in fact. And no greater havoc can be wreaked in people's spiritual life than to have the scene rife with such false pretenders. Avaishnava Mukod Ganam Putam Harikaram. Just as milk is normally very nutritious and wholesome, it's said that. That reminds me, I have to get some raw milk over in Springville for my golden milk with turmeric and cardamom and black pepper and all. Milk can be very nutritious, and it is very nutritious. It's said that cow's milk will provide finer tissues within the brain. Great saints and sages who had perfect memories. After hearing thousands and thousands of verses on spiritual subject matters, they could retain and repeat everything pretty much verbatim. Their nutrition would be 12, 16 ounces of milk, fresh milk from the cow in the morning. They would go to the doorways of the householders and beg from them only a cup of milk. That's it. And that milk gave them such great brain power that they would assimilate and repeat transcendental literature for the benefit of all mankind. Well, milk is good, but when a serpent has come into the pot, maybe the pot was left on the ground outside for a few minutes, and during those moments of inattention, a serpent may have come and touched the milk with its poisonous fangs and released some of that venom into the milk. And the milk looks the same. It hasn't changed in its looks, but the content has become deadly. So there are many motivational speakers, Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins, and others who have many good points, but they're not going to lead one to Krishna. They're not going to lead people to that ultimate solution for their shortcomings, for their problems, for their angst, for their anxiety, for their tension, for their stress, for their anger management problems. Krishna is such a person that whenever anyone comes into contact with him, under any pretext, in any way, shape, or form, one will get benefit, one will get purified. To take all the teachings of Krishna and to extract Krishna from within it is actually a disservice to mankind. Similarly, no one should enter that, going back to our original analogy, no one should enter that door with all kinds of negative symbols on it unless one knows the art of presenting the words of God faithfully. Prabhupada said one time, people ask me what they're gurus that have come and produced gold from ashes, and do all kinds of magic tricks. Prabhupada said, what magic trick can you do? And Prabhupada said, I've just repeated what I've heard from the previous authorities. I've just delivered the orthodox message of Krishna as Krishna spoke it himself to Arjuna, as Krishna spoke it to Brahma, and Brahma spoke it to Narada, and Narada spoke it to Vasudeva, coming down into civic succession. This brings us to the three qualifications. Who, because we talked previously extensively, the 10th verse in the 3rd chapter of the 8th canto of Bhagavatam talks about how no one can force Krishna to come within the purview of our senses by our own efforts. So one might come to the conclusion then that nobody can see God, nobody can know God. That statement has been made repeatedly. But it's not that nobody can see God. It's that unless you're qualified, you cannot see God, or that you cannot see God unless you approach a qualified devotee. You know, if you're a tenant in the apartment building, and you call up the maintenance person, the authorized person, you tell them the heat's not working, and it may have its source of malfunction in the maintenance room, then you've alerted the maintenance man that there's a problem, heat is not working, and then he goes in, and he's the one who can actually make the adjustment. So we need to get things done. We need to get ourselves where we need to go using the authorized authorities, the trained authorities to do so. First thing you look for is character. Someone claims to be a spiritual leader. What's their character? I remember my parents were Episcopalians back in Pennsylvania. And we went to this little Episcopalian church called St. Michael's of the Valley. It was in a little crossroads town called Rector. Happened to be very near Rolling Rock, where the Mellons lived, the Carnegies lived, all the rich steel people from the Pittsburgh area had their weekend houses out in that area. Now, the Episcopalians don't ask a lot of their priests in terms of abstinence or abnegation. So our priests, as I noticed, being a young person, priests would drink, priests would smoke. One of our priests had to go into rehab, into a hospital for alcoholism as well. I'm sure I got a lot of valid teachings. I'm sure they repeated the Bible accurately on more than one occasion. But when I looked at the example they're set, their addictions, their shortcomings, their bad habits, it negated the effect, the potentially beneficial effect of the words on my heart. So when I met a devotee downtown Sydney, Australia, in February of 1970, he told me about the three regulative principles: no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, no meeting. And he also told me that God was a person. I remember that conversation as clearly as if it was yesterday. It was 54 years ago. There was a potency, there was a power there. In telling me that God's a person, he probably didn't say anything that I hadn't heard multiple times in the Episcopal Church. And by the way, my father, if you lived under my father's roof, you went to church every Sunday. You never missed. You didn't have the option. And you didn't smart off to my dad. He was a lieutenant colonel in the infantry. So you didn't say no. You went along with my dad. So I had a lot of exposure. And I'm sure I heard words to that effect hundreds of times. God is a person. God is a person. And yet it seemed so fresh, so new. It was as if I was hearing it for the first time when I heard it from a devotee. And when I thought back upon that and tried to come to a conclusion as to why that would have been, well, the best thing I can think of is that he wasn't smoking, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't taking illicit sex, he wasn't eating meat, he wasn't gambling. So it wasn't the words per se, but it was the character. It was the discipline behind it that had potency. And when I heard the devotee say that God is a person, it was as if I'd never heard it before. It was as if I was hearing it. It was so fresh and it had such power. That's one of the things that you look for, is that purported spiritual leader addicted to intoxication, illicit sex, gambling, or meat eating. Someone would say, well, why meat eating? Most of our priests in the Western countries are meat eaters. Yes, and they're not qualified to lead you back home, back to the spiritual world. It's for that very reason. Eating meat, causing unnecessary cruelty and bloodshed to the animals, is anathema to spiritual progress. So that's the first thing you look for, is the character. A spiritual leader, guide, must be free from these four bad habits: meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. But there are people who follow those principles, who don't eat meat, who don't have illicit sex, who don't take intoxication, who don't gamble, who are still not gurus, not qualified. The next thing you look for is, are they conversant with the scriptures, not just conversant with the scriptures, but do you feel they embody? Do you feel they personify the scriptures? Not just that they're quoting the scriptures from their head up, but they're living their scriptures with their heart. And that's one thing about Prabhupada. In a 24-hour day, you could take a snapshot of any part of any one of his days at any time, morning, noon, night, and he would always be in full Krishna consciousness. First time Prabhupada came to Australia was in May of 1971, and I was in charge at the time. Later, there were many leaders that were going to come, and I was going to step to the side, more qualified people. But they say even a cactus in the desert can become prominent where there are no other trees. So, because I was an American, because I had a little bit of communication skills, I was in charge right away. Almost as soon as I joined, I was like in charge, and it was a lot for me. And eventually, more seasoned devotees came from America in order to take the helm. But I was a go-to guy in 1971. Prabhupada came. He stayed for 4 days. During those 4 days, I was with him from morning till evening. And I never noticed that there was a time when he let his hair down or let his guard down or talked about anything ordinary or mundane. Everything was Krishna conscious. And at that time, there weren't many books published. Later on, many, many, many books came. And as I was read those books in subsequent years, it would recall to me things that Prabhupada said during those first 4 days. We didn't have the books for them, but he was quoting the books. He was living, he personified the books. You have to look for someone who personifies the scriptures. He's gonna guide you back to the spiritual world. Tamasho Madhyotirgama. He's going to guide you from the darkness to the light. Asatam Mada Satogama. He's going to guide you from the temporary world to the eternal world. Mritum Mad Amritam Gamaya. He's going to take you from death, repeated birth, death, disease, and old age, to that world where you'll be deathless, or you'll be able to reclaim your eternal, immortal life in the kingdom of God. So for that journey, you don't need some fake, some poseur, some pretender. You need the real thing. If you're driving from Salt Lake City to Savannah, Georgia, and someone has approached you and said, "Can I ride along? I know the way. I can tell you which turns to take and how to navigate it." They better know what they're talking about. Whatever they tell you, you should be able to verify that by checking on your GPS system. If what they're telling you how to get to Savannah, Georgia, differs from what the GPS system is saying, you had better invite them to leave, to get out of your car, and in fact not be a companion to it all, because they are less than what they purport themselves to be. Okay, so we have two criteria now for someone who is a bona fide guide, someone who's trained up and who can take you, just like he can take electricity and he can take it from generating cold, he can, at his will, can cause that same electricity to generate heat. In the summertime, he can take that same electricity, which has been generating heat, and he can use it to generate cold. So who is qualified to take you from darkness of matter, from birth, death, disease, and old age, from ignorance to knowledge, eternity, and life? Two things we've discovered. One is they must be pure in character. And the second is they have to personify, embody the scripture, and be able to navigate you unerringly in the straightest, shortest, least danger-filled path back home, back to Godhead. But there may be people who follow four regular principles, who know the scripture, and who still are not completely qualified as gurus. So there's one more thing, if you don't want to be misled, that you need to look for. And that is, are they trained up by a previous guru? The fact is that You cannot become a guru. You cannot lead others back home, back to Godhead, unless you've apprenticed under a previous self-realized soul, coming down into cyclical session. Krishna tells Arjuna in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that I personally, the Supreme Personality of God, Vedaham Samadhitana Varjamanani. Krishna knows everything past, present, and future. He also says, Veda Shasayeva Ham Vedam Vedanta Krideva Vid Eva Chaham. I am the knower of the Vedas, I'm the compiler of the Vedas, and by the Vedas I'm to be known. Krishna knows it all. He created it all. He knows everything there is to know about this universe. So as the repository of all knowledge, you might say, like the ocean of knowledge, he speaks to Arjuna, the essence. And that Arjuna then speaks to another and speaks to another and speaks to another. And coming down in disciplic session, having originated with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the knowledge has potency. If you don't receive it from a previous guru, then you're not getting the potent. If you've got a wall outlet and there's been a short circuit anywhere between that wall outlet and the powerhouse, maybe a little mouse has nibbled on the wires behind the walls, or there's been I remember we had, for weeks, we had no phone service here in the temple because they're building a big recreation center up there in Spanish Fork, and in the course of excavating the site, they broke the main power line that Comcast uses to bring, or whatever it is, CenturyLink brings them. So we didn't have a phone for like weeks. That didn't stop them sending the bill. But in any case, the connection has to be there with the disciplic session, just like the connection between the outlet on your wall to the powerhouse has to be intact. It has to be inviolated. Then you'll get electricity. I can run the computers. I have lights here. Everything works. Similarly, one has to have been a servant of a bona fide representative of the Lord in order to qualify oneself. There's no such thing as declaring yourself a guru, hanging up your own shingle, so to speak. The same thing is true even in mundane disciplines. Whoever became a doctor by reading books? You can read all the medical books there are. You could know all the theory that's possible to know. But that still doesn't mean they're going to let you in and perform brain surgery in the operating room. No, what's missing there is you have to apprentice. You have to spend long hours working beside people who are seasoned and experienced veterans in the area. There's something that happens after you've been practicing something for decades and decades. It's kind of an alchemy. In the medieval times, we read about people that performed the same functions over and over and over and over and over again. The alchemical process for changing iron to gold was the same process, repeated over and over and over again. It had to do with mercury and certain acids. And the 1111th time that the same process was repeated, something magical, something alchemical would happen, an unexplained, supernatural phenomenon would occur whereby the iron would all of a sudden become gold. And no one would know at what point it would be. No one would know how many repetitions. It was a mystery. It's when the time came, the time would be there, and then that's all you knew. So similarly, when people have been practicing medicine for decades and decades and decades, they develop an instinct. They develop a supernatural intuition. They can discern, they can intimate what the actual basis for the patient's ailment is and prescribe very, very effectively. Spot on. Prabhupada tells a story. One time he was visiting with a friend who had practiced medicine for many years. He had a shop which opened out onto the street, and as they were sitting in a comfortable moment of silence, a passerby came by, and they overheard him just giving a little hack, a little cough. And the doctor, because of his years of experience, he said, that man will die within a week. And it happened. He actually passed away of a lung disease within a week. He knew that. So you can't get this from books. You can't get this from classrooms. You can only get it from people that have been practicing almost mystically for decades and decades and decades. So everyone who gets certified as a doctor has been required to spend, I don't know what it is, 2 or 3 years doing what they call their residency, working under other experienced doctors in the field. Another example is law. No one can practice law having read all the books. It's not sufficient. You have to go and get apprentice. You have to clerk. It's the term they use in a law firm. Work for a couple of years without any salary to speak of, and learn. Follow the veteran practitioners around and soak up by osmosis and by questions and by doing what they ask you to do. And then you'll be qualified in due course of time. Also, one thing is you can't be a clerk at a law firm and just ask questions. You have to you have to gratify your superiors by also serving them. They have cases to try, they have research to do. And if they're going to answer your questions and give you the benefit of their experience, you cannot just waste their time asking questions. You have to ask questions, but you also have to make yourself useful by assisting them in the work that they have to do. You have to spend long hours in research, writing papers, advising them, drawing conclusions, saving them valuable time that they don't have to spend in that way. Similarly, as far as being a bona fide disciple of a bona fide guru, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena upadekshantite gyanam jnanena sattvadarshana. One must learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master. And having approached a bona fide spiritual master, there are two more things one should do. One should inquire submissively, but not just take up the guru's time inquiring over and over and over again, but rendering service. So when the teacher is pleased that you're assisting him, taking some of the burdens off of his shoulder, helping spread the good news, as a partner, as an assistant, as someone who's wholeheartedly in, yeah, count me in, then that teacher becomes very pleased. He or she is very happy to share transcendental knowledge. So what have we learned? We've learned that not just anybody and everybody should read a book or take a course or go on YouTube or go online, learn a few things haphazardly about bhakti, and then present themselves as a spiritual authority. That is called a disturbance in society. That is called the milk being polluted by the venom of a poisoned serpent. One has to have had the qualifications. One has to have taken the training. One has to be pure in character. One has to embody and know the scriptures, how to navigate souls from this dark, temporary, miserable material world to the eternal, blissful, full of knowledge realm of the kingdom of God. And finally, one must have arrived at that point of authentic spiritual mentorship by virtue of having followed in the footsteps of a previous acharya. Only those who are initiated by previous acharyas are receive the benefit of the full power, the full charge, which comes down through the ages from Krishna himself. So when you come to a door, it might be the door to the deity room in the temple. It might be the door to the maintenance room in a large apartment or office building, and it says no admittance. It doesn't mean that nobody can get admittance, but it means that no ordinary person, without having taken the steps needed to train oneself and learn how to work with vast, unimaginable power, tens of thousands of volts of electricity, or in the case of the deity department, one must have a pure consciousness to walk in. You just can't have anyone walk in off the street into the deity department. Through that door is the clothes of the deity, the paraphernalia, items which are very dear to the Lord himself, and you cannot tolerate those items being defiled or that atmosphere being defiled by someone who's bringing in their polluted street consciousness into that. Every once in a while, we hear a horrible story which makes us all cringe about some outsider, some blasphemer who made their way into the deity room and inevitably created some sort of an atrocity. So we try to avoid that at all costs. We want to serve the Lord with hygiene, with regularity, and above devotion. And part of our devotional service is to guard the Lord, to protect the Lord from those of offensive consciousness. If you have a loved one, or if you're a parent and you have children, you want to protect your children from pornography, from excessive violence, from swear words, from bad association. You want to protect them from all of that. It wasn't that difficult to do before the emergence of the internet. Now it's like, good luck with that. It's like I never had any kids because I wouldn't be up to the task, to tell you the honest truth. All right, so we've got a few minutes left here. Let's talk about Anantashesha. Anantashesha is the bet. He's another incarnation of Balaram, the elder brother of Krishna. The elder brother always looks after the younger brother. Elder brother is always, stereotypically stronger and tougher. And if anybody at school bullies or pushes around or messes the little brother, they're going to have to deal with the older brother. Okay. There was a story about this bully, and he always used to push this kid around. And so he came to the door. He actually was so bold. He came to the door of the young boy whose lunch money he used to steal and used to push around, knocked on the door, and he asked the kid standing in the doorway, "I want some money." And kid now the kid was not as timid as he was out in the street or in the school. The kid said, "I'm not giving you any money." He said, "Where did you learn to talk to me like this? Where did you get the boldness to talk to me like this? I've been slapping you around for weeks." And then coming from the house, from behind the door, his big brother stood beside the little boy. And then the bully himself became he he was in the things had flipped now. Now he better back down or he was going to get his face slapped, you see. So the boldness, the uncharacteristic first time emergent boldness of this young boy came from the fact that his older brother was right there at hand. So Balaram is the older brother of Krishna, and as such, he looks after Krishna. He's like Krishna's bodyguard. To get to Krishna, you have to go through Balaram. Balaram also takes the form of Lakshman in Ram Lila, and he takes the form of Nityananda in Chaitanya Lila. And as far as the formal, majestic incarnation of Krishna is concerned, um, uh, Narayan or Mahavishnu, this Balaram takes the form of a many-headed serpent upon whom the Lord reclines. The Lord relaxes on the coils of the serpent on top of the Garbhodak ocean. Now, one time, Ananta asked at the beginning of a creation, this multi-headed serpent asked Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe, if there was some service that he could do aside from just providing a floating bed on the ocean for the Lord. Was there any additional service that he could do? And Lord Brahma says, um, you can assist Korma. Korma is the tortoise who on his back he holds all the planetary systems in place. He said you can assist Korma by holding all the planets on your head. And then Ananta said, "Well, how long? What will be the end time for this?" He was curious to know, like, how he should mentally prepare himself for this task and how he should pace himself and so on and so forth. So Brahma said, "Do this." He said, "You start in at the beginning of your service for basically providing gravity. Anantashesha is the power of of gravity, which works to cause things to fall from up to down, but it also works to hold the planets in orbit. Um, so you'll perform this task for as long as you can sing the glories of the Lord. You start now with your 100+ heads, and with each head separately and independently, they're not all saying the same thing. They're not all parroting each other, but each head is talking um, uh, articulately about Uttamashoka, the Supreme Lord, whose glories do not derive from any material source. Rather, everything that's worthwhile, that's attractive in this material world has Krishna as its origin. So that unlimitedly qualified person, you start to glorify with your many mouths, each mouth speaking separately, independently. And when you come to the end, that will coincide with the moment when you put the planets down again. Okay. Now, since Ananta started that, many Brahmas have come and gone. The Brahma who gave that instruction is long gone. Now, Brahma, according to the Bhagavad Gita, Sasya Yuga Pariyatam, he lives the lifetime of one Brahma. The universe is manifest, and Brahma engineers all the different bodies and 8,400,000 species of life. He supports them. He lives on the highest planet of this each and every particular universe. There's millions of universes, and there's a Brahman for every universe. And the lifetime of Brahma is about 311 trillion years, after which time he passes away. There's a period of non-manifestation where everything reverts back to darkness. There's no visible material phenomenal world. And then after 311 trillion years, Mahavishnu breathes out, he exhales, and all the worlds again are manifested from where they've been retracted within his body. And for another 311 trillion years, there's a manifestation. And then Brahma dies. That Brahma dies as the last one died, and everything's retracted. And then, it's said that many Brahmas have come and gone since the original Brahma gave Ananta the instruction to enumerate the glories of the Lord. What do we learn from this? That there is no limit to the glories of the Lord. Gunatmanas tevi gunaman tami tavanisha karisha kalini avamira bhupamsavi myagvigapsha. The gist of it is that no one, including the multi-headed Anantashesha, who is an intimate of the Lord, who is a protector of the Lord, no one can ever finish describing the glories of the Lord. They're unlimited and they're transcendental. They're Uttamashoka. They're above this material world. They're not even accessible to the ordinary man. Bhaktisiddhanta, on one occasion, he said, no one should speak about Krishna unless they're a realized soul, unless they're already realized soul, and they know Krishna intimately from within the heart. No one should speak about Krishna because they won't be able to transmit the full weight of knowledge. It may be theoretical knowledge, but it won't be realized knowledge. So then the question is, are we qualified? Should I be doing these Zoom classes? And should any of the preachers all over the world who are giving Bhagavatam classes and Sunday feast lecture, who may not be 100% realized, should any of them be doing what they're doing? And here's an example. Let's say a friend of mine speaks to me about his mother. I hear the description of his mother from the friend. Now, when I repeat that description to someone else, it's missing something essential, isn't it? It's missing the realization. When my friend speaks to me about his mother, he has a lifetime of realizations. He's experienced his mother 8-10 hours a day for the entirety of his life. So he knows what he's talking about. It's coming from a genuine place in the heart. Now, I could repeat the same information to someone else, but it wouldn't have the potency. It wouldn't have what we call the realization. So without the full realization of Krishna, should anybody be able to speak anything about Krishna? And there is one statement from Bhaktivedanta that says no. It says unless you're fully qualified, realized spiritual mentor, you shouldn't speak anything about Krishna. The difference is that Krishna asks us to speak about him. He wants us to speak about him because even though we are not realized we have all kinds of impurities and think gravitating against the upward thrust of Krishna consciousness. It is in the speaking about Krishna that will become cleansed of those impurities and will make further progress. Not only that, but if we speak after the ways of the great authorities, if Krishna hears in our words the same words and the same intentions that he's heard from Narada Muni, from Vyasadeva, and from so many other great people, Krishna is pleased. One time, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was chanting Hare Krishna, and some of his uh, detractors criticized him. They say, you know, we're like the wives, we're like the servants of Krishna. And the wife doesn't say the name of her husband out loud. That's considered unchaste and disrespectable. If you've ever heard a traditional Indian lady talk to her husband, she doesn't call him by name. She'll call him Prabhu, which means master. Of course, he'll have the same deference for her, but there's different names for it. But proper traditional, what's considered a chaste wife, she'll not call, hey, Charu, Charu, Charu. Yeah, it won't do that. And so these critics of Lord Chaitanya were saying, if you're supposed to be a servant, if you're supposed to be the chaste follower of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Krishna, you shouldn't say the name of Krishna out loud. That's disrespectful. That's presumptive. That's, in a sense, contemptuous. And Lord Chaitanya took a stick and he began chasing him and beating him. And he pointed out that normally that's true. You do not address the husband directly by his name. But Krishna has asked us to do it. When the husband asks you to call him, he orders you to call him, to speak his name and to spread his name and to share his name, then you have to do it. In spite of what tradition dictates, in spite of what are the common observances, the actual direct order of the husband trumps, it eclipses any other customary practices. And so Krishna has said, Harinama, 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 Eva Kevalam, Karona, Stevan, Stevan, Steva Gatya. Krishna Vanitita Krishnam in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam says that Krishna himself, Varnatita Krishnam, he'll come in the Kali Yuga age as a devotee. Krishna will come as his own devotee. He'll not be black. He'll be of a golden color, and his activities will be specifically to spread the name of Krishna, Pritivite Atedito Nagaradugram Sarvachapachoive Moinam, to every town and village of the world. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Although what we say with our tongue cannot properly and fully describe the Lord because we haven't got the practical realization, we do it anyway. Because number one, Krishna has asked us to do it. And number two, our Krishna's representatives have asked us to do it. And number three, if we speak faithfully, if we repeat faithfully the words that we've heard from our previous authorities, Krishna is very pleased. Rather than being displeased, he's actually very pleased. And we'll talk about why that's so more tomorrow. Well, thanks very much for being with us. This has been Motivational Monday. Let's see what we have here. Brent jumped on. Shali came. We saw her yesterday at the Sunday feast and 2 days earlier, Thanksgiving Day. Shali's fired up, redoing her at least one of the rooms in her house to have a nice worship area for Krishna and Radharani to come sometime in the future. And Joshua, our longtime attendee, is doing, who works in woodworking, is doing the altar for her. And I overheard them talking last night. Next week, her altar will be ready to take down to Ephraim. Kelly Haribo, shout out to Idaho up there. Thanks for jumping on board, and thanks for all your support on Patreon and here and there and everything. Facebook. Brent, okay, here's our first treat of the morning. If you don't know what you're doing, enter the door to the generating room could lead you to your tomb. But an expert electrician can use the room so we can hear Charu does on Facebook and Zoom. Where did you come up with that? That was an unexpected twist there. If you don't know what you're doing, enter the door to the generating room could lead you to your tomb. But an expert electrician can use the room so we can hear truths. Sundari Priya, thank you very much for checking in. Glory to Prabhupada. Here's more from Vallabha Chandra. Be sure to follow someone whose character is pure. Take your guide from the qualified. You'll recognize them by the way the scriptures they have applied. Make it your goal to follow the servant of another self-realized soul. There it is, all three qualifications. 3 sentences, 3 qualifications. Be sure to follow someone whose character is pure, number 1. Take your guide from the qualified. You'll recognize them by the way the scriptures they have applied. So there's 2 sentences, the second principle. And the third is make it your goal to follow the servant of another self-realized soul. Exactly. And Shali echoes that not just any guru will do, find the one whose line is true. Very nice. Okay, we have a lot more nectar tomorrow, so please, I appreciate all of you taking the time out in the beginning of your day to stay with us and also give us your feedback and your comments. That's extremely inspiring for me. So much so that I'll be back here this time tomorrow. In the meantime, enjoy your day by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.